All right. So good morning, everyone, and welcome to our webinar on retrofit success stories in BC First Nations communities. My name is Erin Peterson, and I'm the program lead for climate and energy resilience at the Fraser Basin Council. So I'll be facilitating the webinar today, and I will, and my colleagues, Elena Chia and Alwyn Rutherford, are also here helping out. So if you have any technical issues, you can reach out to Alwyn through the chat box, and we'll do our best to help you out with any Zoom issues or things like that. Before we get started, I will mention a couple of housekeeping items. I think people noticed already, but we are keeping the audience muted during this webinar. We have left the chat enabled, so if you want to interact with each other, please feel free to do that in the chat. But for questions for the speakers, please try to put those in the Q&A box just so that we know where to find them. We will monitor the chat, but try to keep the questions in the Q&A box if possible. Moving on, we'll start with a territorial acknowledgement. So I'm very fortunate today to be calling in from the traditional unceded territories of the Hulkaminam speaking First Peoples, also known now as Richmond, BC. So I want to express my gratitude for the opportunity that I have to live, work, and play here on these lands. If you would like, please feel free to share the traditional territories that you're calling in from in the chat as well. So I'll just do a quick intro to who FBC is. So the Fraser Basin Council is a charitable nonprofit society, and we bring people together to advance sustainability throughout British Columbia. So our work isn't limited to the Fraser River Basin anymore. And we act in roles such as facilitator, strategic convener, educator, and program manager. And our initiatives focus on partnerships and collaboration in 3 areas. Climate change and air quality, which this webinar falls under, watersheds and water resources is another area, and sustainable and resilient communities is our 3rd focus area. So this program hosting this webinar is called First Nations Home Energy Save. So this program doesn't fund retrofits or provide rebates, but we focus on learning and capacity building. So we want to empower communities to transition towards energy efficient housing through sharing success stories, so like this webinar, and building local capacity. So you can see on the slide there some of the different things that we do. And I'll just plug a couple of our programs that could use a bit more participation. So the first is our Learning Grant program. So we are offering grants of up to $1,000 for Indigenous individuals in BC to put it towards a course, workshop, or conference related to energy efficiency. And we also have our Ask an Energy Specialist program, which offers free short-term consulting support from an energy specialist for BC First Nations communities. And we will have some links in the chat for all these programs. We'll also put our email addresses in the chat if you'd like to reach out. All right. So I will go ahead and introduce our speakers now as well. So today's webinar will start with 2 presentations. The first will be from Gaëtane Carignan from the Community Energy Association, and she'll be speaking on behalf of Akisq First Nation. Second presentation will be from Gilles Lesage from Total Home Solutions, and he will be speaking on behalf of Osoyoos Indian Band. So we'll have the 2 presentations first, and then after both are finished, we'll have 20 minutes for audience Q&A. So if you do have questions that come up during the presentations, then you're welcome to put them in the chat, in the Q&A box. Don't put them in the chat. And we will keep an eye on those. And if we don't get to your question, we will also try to follow up afterwards by email. So I'm going to stop my screen. Here we go. And I'll introduce our first speaker. So Gaëtane is a facilitator with the Relationships and Reconciliation Service Area of the Community Energy Association, or CEA. She leads the Building a Legacy initiative, which is a collaboration of Canadian Home Builders of Northern BC and CEA. And it brings awareness and builds capacity on topics related to high performance, low carbon building in both new and retrofit construction. Whoa, look at that. You're so on it. Okay, I'll pass it over to you and take it away.
Thanks very much, Erin. Pleasure to be here. Thank you very much for inviting me to be here today. Um, I'm calling in from Akisq, the traditional ancestral territory of the Ktunaxa First Nation. And specifically, I'm in the land of ravens, also known as Fernie, BC. I just recently learned that from the creation story as told by Chief Joe Pierre of the community of Akam. I've been working in capacity building and communications around high performance buildings and the BC Energy Step Code, and now the Zero Carbon Step Code since I joined the organization in 2017. And during that time, I had the pleasure of walking alongside Akisq through some of the stages of their retrofit journey. So as an organization, Community Energy Association learned a lot from their story. And from these learnings and others, we continue to walk with other First Nations and settler communities alike to support similar processes and positive outcomes. I'd first like to thank Lisa Canady, of the Economic Development Officer for Akisq, for permitting me to share this story with you today and to show appreciation and recognition of this being a Akisq story. When I present this case study externally, I volunteer my time, and the speaker fee from FBC today is going to be given to Akisq, and these funds are going to support, in part, Akisq producing a video of their retrofit journey, which they're going to be presenting at their annual General Assembly later this summer. So just to orient ourselves, this is Ktunaxa in what is now known as the southeast corner of British Columbia into Alberta and down into the United States. I'm down in the corner here in Fernie, and then Akisq is about an hour and a half drive north from me, close to the community of Invermere. My organization is a not-for-profit organization that has 50 staff located across 29 communities throughout 5 provinces and territories. And we work to accelerate bold action by local governments and Indigenous communities related to climate and energy. A lot of overlap with the work that FBC does, actually. And so how is fixing your house climate action? In BC, buildings are the 3rd highest emitters of greenhouse gas. And so building better is climate action. Not only do deep energy retrofits create homes with lower heating and cooling bills, but they also represent one of the best opportunities for climate action by reducing our energy use and upgrading our homes so that we can weather the coming storms. So the work that Akisq did, there were 3 main components here that we want to draw attention to. So there's obviously the planning work. And then a really critical piece of all of these types of projects is the engagement. So the community engagement of not only community members, but elected officials, the staff at Akisq, and the broader community. And so the building industry as a whole, the suppliers, the contractors, the energy advisors. And then the next one is ACT. So I have a question here as a note to myself. I wanted to ask you, how many stakeholders do you note throughout this presentation? And just take a note of how many different types of stakeholders and people are involved that created this success. It was a long timeline for Akisq. I think now, as we get more experience in doing this kind of work, the timeline doesn't have to be this long. But in Akisq's example, in 2008 to 2009, Ktunaxa had a nation had an energy manager, and that's actually my current boss is Megan Lohman. She was working as a community energy manager for Ktunaxa Nation. They developed a Ktunaxa energy and emissions plan. In 2013, they did an initial engagement with the Energy Conservation Assistance Program. So that was offered through BC Hydro. In 2017, started the building capacity. There was community engagement. There was homeowner outreach and some thermal imagery that happened. So this was all building up to the actual action. In 2018, building and energy assessments were completed, and there were some immediate quick fixes done along with those energy audits. And then in 2019, after those 28 energy audits were done, and we had the Energuide recommendations from the reports that were created from those energy audits, We issued an RFP for contractors, so a request for proposal from contractors, and we were able to bulk purchase a bunch of materials to get this done. And then in 2020, finally, so Akisq looked at those 28 homes. They needed to decide what their priority was for the first 10. Originally, I had thought coming in, I thought, oh, well, we'll probably focus on the houses that need it the most and that are in the worst shape. Akisq didn't go that way. They decided that they wanted to prioritize their elders' homes. And so that's what was done. So talking a little bit about building local capacity. So not only is it important to bring community members along and increase the energy literacy of the homeowners and tenants, but also alongside of that, we were building the capacity in the communities around Akisq. And so we were offering building science workshops. There was hands-on demonstrations. BC Hydro came to the community and did a presentation on energy efficiency and ways to save money through higher efficiency appliances and things like that. There was support from BC Hydro customer service, and we received feedback from the community on priorities and the needs for housing. And so all of these different aspects came together. There was also a week-long training offered, so it was a partnership between the local building supply, Home Hardware in Invermere, a local contractor who ultimately they did end up doing the retrofits as well, but at the time that wasn't a known. They offered to do this training, and then it was community members that came, and so it was a week-long training, and they ended up building a shed with a lot of the skills and information that they would need later on to do the retrofits themselves. They built a shed together. There's also engaging the community and the home occupants. So there was a workshop about home energy and an envelope of first approach and house as a system concepts. And so at first, many communities were very interested in focusing on solar and getting solar panels and doing that renewable energy piece first. And conversations we had with community members were just to show that no matter what the energy source, whether it was a gas furnace or it was wood burning appliances, or it was electric from renewable sources or on grid, no matter what, if your envelope, you don't have much insulation, your roof's leaking, you have air tightness issues, you're going to use more energy than you would. And so optimizing that energy use by fixing the envelope first was really emphasized. The housing managers were key components in this, and so there was a lot of outreach. There was phone calls to each community member. There was a completion of a registration form. There were scheduled visits to each home, and every occupant, they were really kept up to date about why and how and when and what to expect. And then another piece of this was doing thermal imagery. And so the energy advisor had a camera, and in the winter before the retrofits were going to be done, when there's a thermal gradient, so these pictures can't necessarily be done in the summer when there's no thermal gradient, so you need to have timing. But they went around and they took pictures of the houses that were going to be retrofitted and assessed. And so this was a really good way to show the residents where the issues were. So the bad doors and the lacking of insulation or air leakage or a poorly insulated foundation wall. And when we held a community dinner, the energy advisor was right there with his computer, and he was having little semi-private meetings with everyone, showing them their house. And it was a really good way to engage people and show them in a tangible way what some of the images were, what issues were with their house, and how those were going to be addressed. And this is a poster that it's just a summary poster of everything that took place. I'll get into it a little bit more. One really key thing for our program was having immediate benefit from the very first home visit and the assessment and triage. And so the energy advisor was going there with a couple of the people who attended that shed building exercise and training. Members of the community, he took some community energy champions with him, and they went in, and when he was doing the energy assessment, installed the blower door. And while right there on site, they were able to do a bunch of quick fixes. And so this was the result of that. So the blower door here represented on the left, blower door tests on every home were measured the effectiveness of the draft proofing work. And an average of 3 hours per home, what were the most common upgrades right there on site? So they did caulking, they did sealing around windows and doors. They changed out air filters in some furnaces. They did insulation of pipes, and they changed light bulbs and shower heads. And so they would do this. They do one house in the morning, they take a lunch break, and then they would go and they do another house in the afternoon. So it was very coordinated, and over about 3 weeks, they were able to do 28 homes on and off reserve for Akisq community members. And I just want you, a question I have for you, what do you think within those first 3 hours of just going in and doing some quick fixes and doing this energy audit, between a 5% improvement or 25% improvement, just think, what do you think the average improvement was, and what was the absolute best improvement we got in air tightness with just that really quick triage? So this is just some pictures of those first of the community energy champions here going in while the blower door test is running. You can actually feel the leaks with your hands. You can have smoke tests and things, but you can see where the issues are, and that facilitated them going in and fixing the problems, finding and fixing the problems. And then these are, again, common areas around the doors, the door seals. There's mold issues, pictures there showing in the top picture with the wood, the mold and the seals around the windows and the pipes. Here's some thermal imagery showing some issues around the doors. And once you put that air seal, that door had been sealed, and how that has changed the thermal imagery to show improvement. So within those first 3 hours of going and doing that triage and doing the energy audit, there was an 11% average improvement in air leakage in those 28 homes. And some homes achieved as much as 20% improvement in the air leakage. So just, it went to show that it was quite inexpensive and really effective. And it showed the occupants of the houses improvement right away. They didn't have to wait for a year for somebody to come back and do something. Their doors were hung up better, their windows were sealed, their houses were less drafty right from the get-go, in addition to collecting a bunch of data that we were then able to use to do the bigger, deeper energy retrofits afterward. And so we combined the data collection with immediate draft proofing. We installed the energy kits, which included light bulbs and shower heads, air filters, insulating the pipes, sealing the doors and windows. That action creates trust right away, and it demonstrated immediate progress and improvement. It was also a learning opportunity for the energy champions and home occupants. And if doing all this stuff while the blower door test is running is a way easier to identify those air leaks. And then the inspection for the other components of the house for retrofit opportunities was happening at the same time, and identifying next steps, which in this case was a bundled approach to repairs and retrofits. And so I think one of the great advantages and opportunities on many First Nations communities is this opportunity to bundle these programs. And so it's not a one-off approach where someone in one neighborhood decides on their personal house to do this. It can be really coordinated, and it can be many houses at the same time. So in that case, you can batch the data, and you know what the priority upgrades are going to be in many of the houses. If they've been built similarly, they have similar ages, they have similar window types, all those sort of things. And so you're going to know what windows and doors you're going to need, the type and amount of insulation you're going to want, the siding, the mechanical upgrades that are going to be common. And then you have bulk purchase power. And so that's going to be allow First Nations communities in many cases to negotiate a supplies and equipment discount. And then there's fair and transparent selection of homes was really important in any case, in any of these communities, because there's usually more work than can be done immediately, and everybody wants to have their home improved. And so how you're selecting which houses get to go first and who is prioritized, keeping that transparent and open is a really important component of this. This picture is actually my own house. I had the energy advisor come and look at my house and did a thermal imagery. I live in a 1977 log home. And we learned that that entire roof line there has absolutely no insulation. So when I'm freezing in my home office in January, I understand why now, which I wouldn't have known before without the energy audit. And even working in this line of work that I do, foolishly, I was saying to Nate, Nate, can I have a heat pump? Will you recommend a heat pump? And he said, absolutely not, Gaëtane, because you live in a tent. You need to address your envelope. And so there's at the bottom there, you can see all the suggested priority items, which I would need to insulate the attic. I would insulate the slope ceilings and flat roofs. I would perform air sealing, all of these things before I upgrade my mechanical system. So we're working on the roof this year, and maybe someday I'll get my heat pump yet, but not yet. Something really important in the Akisq program and anywhere is to identify quality, accountable contractors. So this is a picture of Nate Sarita on the left and Meredith Hampstead on the right of Think Bright Homes and Energy Advise. They both demonstrate understanding of house as a system and envelope first approach. We had contracts with clear accountability and budgets and timelines. We were incorporating final energy and building assessments. And so having that pre-energy audit and then having the post-energy audit after the repairs are done is so beneficial to be able to show the improvements and what's been done. There's cultural sensitivity and willingness to mentor. And so both of these contractors showed that in that they were able to take on, they both hired community energy champions, and then Meredith and Think Bright Homes were able to hire apprentices from the community. And there was a neighboring community that had a really similar approach to everything. They followed all the steps that I've talked about. So they did the community engagement, they worked with their elected officials, they had workshops outside of the community to build the capacity of the industry everywhere with the contractors and energy advisors and things. At the very end of it, the RFP that they had issued, it went to contractors who didn't necessarily buy in this same way. These contractors had not attended any of our workshops. They weren't asking questions. They were quite evasive. And so all of that upfront work had been done. And then I later learned that that community had outcomes that were, their airtightness, for example, was worse after a retrofit than when it had started. So just a word of caution, like that all of these steps are really important, and getting committed, kind contractors that are committed to excellence it can't be overstated, and getting that contractual obligation to have a pre and post test is also really important.
Sorry.
This is just a how to work with an energy advisor sheet that we have available at that site there. I believe that Erin's going to forward a PDF of this presentation. So if you want to go and find that best practices guide, you can go find that. This is just pictures of the envelope first approach and the installation of the exterior insulation that happened at Akisq. Some of the challenges on this project. So there was a historic distress of the utility, so BC Hydro, and external support. So really working on building those relationships with the home occupants and homeowners was really key. There was a lack of local capacity to support meaningful initiatives within Akisq, but also outside in the external communities. There's a lack of financial resources to support holistic home upgrades. So what we'll see lots of times with funders is that they may put a certain amount towards windows, and they maybe a certain amount towards insulation and a certain amount towards the mechanical systems. But it's not packaged as a house as a system approach and with sufficient to get it done. Akisq did end up approaching ISK, and were able to achieve the funding that was necessary by showing their batched energy audits, showing what was going to be needed and putting a plan together with that batch of 10. And they also were able to add on about 10% for capacity building within the community. So there was a 10% margin there that allowed for those community energy champions and apprentices to work from Akisq to be building capacity within community. And then there was lack of band authority around the building code enforcement and homes on certificate of possession lands received by the resident. And so that authority and that gray area of BC building code, or if you're in community or on reserve, who has the authority and who's doing the compliance and enforcement and the accountability. So again, those contracts and those pre and post energy audits being really key to finding out what your outcomes are and holding contractors accountable. And then there was frequent turnover. The housing staff and managers at Akisq changed over several times during this timeline, and so maintaining that continuity all throughout was a tricky thing. So since then, that was Akisq. We now are having the opportunity to work with Nisga'a Nation in Northwest BC. And a lot of what we learned from Akisq is now being applied and customized to Nisga'a Nation's context. And these are the key steps that we're saying is probably going to be involved in any program anywhere, where we're going to have a coordinated approach. The building is going to be assessed for airtightness, and we're going to do some of those quick fixes. There's an EnerGuide renovation report that's going to be created with an energy model that identifies those optimized best bang for buck priority upgrades. So in my case, not a heat pump, insulation in the attic, coordinated upgrades with qualified contractors, and then from there, it's improving the building envelope, and then it's improving the mechanical systems. Step 7 is those other things that you can do, like programmable thermostats and energy efficient appliances. Step 8, really critical, conducting a final building condition assessment and airtightness test to measure the repairs that took place. And then hopefully we're getting some feedback from the occupants after they've lived in the home for a year or two after, and finding out what changes have been made. And so in the Akisq example, one of the elders said she had never lived in a comfortable home. And before the retrofits were done, sometimes her toilet water would freeze in the wintertime. It was very uncomfortable. It was the first time she ever got to live in a comfortable home. And that's the whole point. And so that's why this work is really important. And now we're going to be doing a Northwest Energy Retrofit Forum next week. And a bunch of us, including Meredith Hamstead, who did the work at Akisq, are meeting in Nisga'a Nation. And we're going to be talking about their context and how they're going forward with energy retrofitting the majority of their 700 homes in 4 communities. And it's pretty exciting. So hopefully I get to see some of you there.
Great. Thank you so much for that wonderful presentation. We really appreciate it. And also thank you to Akisq for allowing their story to be shared here with everyone. And I think it's really important to share these successes so other folks can benefit as well. So if you do have questions, please pop them in the Q&A. I see a couple in there already, and we'll answer those once Gilles' presentation is done. So I'll quickly introduce him. Gilles is an energy advisor who has been in the industry since 2004, evaluating existing homes and new home construction. As part of his career, he has also been training new and prospective home inspectors and energy evaluators since 2013. Having gone through multiple versions of the federal and provincial programs, the opportunity to participate in community-based programs has been a great opportunity to reduce community members' energy costs and consumption. So I will let you take it away, Gilles.
Perfect, thank you. So I can share my screen now?
Yep, go for it.
Perfect. Screen, share. I'll just get this guy started here. Well, thank you very much. Pleasure to be here. I guess following Gaëtane's presentation, found a lot of similarities between our programs actually, but we had, I guess, generally speaking, we had more homes to deal with, so we couldn't, you know, it would have taken a long time to go into as much depth as Gaëtane's program did with each one. Had we gone that route, but hopefully you see a lot more similarities here as well, and just to see, you know, exactly what we did. So so yes, so our program happened from 2017 to 2020. Is the Osoyoos Indian Band, and again, a lot of very similar things that we'll go through from, and the, you know, lessons learned and outcomes from this program that we'll go through. So again, as Aaron said, a little bit about me, energy advisor for many years. We've got a team of about 6 people at Total Home. We do serve a little bit of everywhere from Chilliwack all the way up to, you know, Revelstoke down to Osoyoos. And we're currently involved with a few more Indigenous community programs that are following very closely the model of what we did at the Osoyoos Indian Band. So in a nutshell, as a summary for the project, we basically were shown that about 165 homes were the primary goals for us to look at. We were introduced through Fortis BC, who's actually kind of not spearheaded the first steps of this program, but they were very, very much interested in having some improvements done, because mostly it was in Fortis's electric and gas territory as well. So the biggest, you know, not so much a complaint, but of a concern was the amount of electricity utility costs that the homeowners and the occupants were experiencing. So at this point, we kept that in mind. We had a few initial meetings with the band, and we also did a couple town hall community outreach programs or sessions as well, just to get the perspective of the community and to see what, you know, where we should go with this. So the homes basically were all built, you know, between 1980s and about 2000, in the mid 2000s. And again, we had about 95% of these homes were electric, and about 5% were actually natural gas. There we go. So again, we reached out to the community, had a couple of informational sessions, and from there on, we were looking to get some funding through Akisq. As well, one of the major funding partners was Fortis BC as well, with their Indigenous Community Conservation Program, which was pretty well just not so much being launched, but was quite new at the time. So our first step was to provide, just like Gaëtane's kind of program, was to start with the energy evaluation. So we went and did energy evaluations on roughly 155 homes, I believe is what we went through in the end. And for each home, we came at it from a perspective of not just energy, but also indoor air quality, healthy homes. So, you know, in regards to ventilation, you know, if there's any kind of humidity issues causing some surface mold, we were keeping an eye on that as well, kind of from the eye of a home inspector as well as an energy evaluator. So with these evaluations, we were able to outline kind of a best case scenario, or what made the most sense for that particular home within the energy evaluation. I think that's the key point, and it was mentioned previously. A very good energy evaluation will give you a roadmap for that particular home, and I think it's important to get that get that first, because as Gaëtane mentioned, sometimes a homeowner or a home occupant will think that, well, my windows are the worst thing ever, and that's what we need to be replacing. And after an audit, it's really amazing how, the windows turn out to be, a bit older, but just fine. But the attic insulation, the heating system, and the air tightness may really be lacking. So the EA can actually prioritize what is needed for each home. So we did that for each of these homes. We created a master kind of a central, it's a big colorful spreadsheet in the end. But what it was is that we tracked every home, and we basically gave each home its kind of its game plan. And we're able to use that information and share it within the community as well. And with the head of the housing and so on and so forth, with our partners to determine, okay, here's what we would like to do. We can't do everything for every house. That, there was a certain amount of limited amount of funding, and we just can't spend all the money in the world, and that's just a matter of fact. So we were able to pinpoint the upgrades specific to each home. We moved a couple to make them within, and so the costs were not exploding. And then we also had the chance to prioritize each and every one of these projects as to which homes will get maybe a little bit more money. If they needed, if they really needed a new heating system, hot water system, attic, and windows, then we would look at that. But now what priority? So mostly went with elders first. Then we had families with children, families without children, and then homes are rented out. So things like that. So we actually had the community create the priority list for us on this informational spreadsheet. So with that, we had a very good foundation, a very good proof of concept to use and actually submit with the funding requests. And we were actually told by ISK that because this happened in 2000 and I believe it was 17, that the energy evaluation list showed that it was going to be that we knew what we were getting ourselves into. We had the necessary first steps and a roadmap that made their job a lot easier, and with full confidence that yes, let's provide some funding. This is all very good. So we had some really good comments from ISK on the fact that by including that, it really helped tremendously. So the evaluation strategy, which is as mentioned, we went through each home. We basically went at it with a common sense approach, not just for energy, but also for home health, for indoor occupant health, indoor air quality, so on and so forth. We also included with that an energy savings kit. We had some light bulbs that were donated by Fortis BC that we kept on site at the Osoyoos Indian Band. We also had a few other things that we would install at the homes while we were doing the audits, very similar to what Gaëtane was doing. We did some thermal imaging as well, kind of on an as-needed basis, just because we had 3 or 4 evaluators going, throughout the day to various homes. So for some of the older ones, after doing some sampling of air tightness, we kind of had an idea as to which homes were actually already doing quite good. Actually, we were surprised. We had the bulk of the 2000 homes were actually very airtight already. So speaks volumes of whoever built them roughly 20 years ago. So with that, we prioritize all the homes, and with our spreadsheet, we're able to do real-time tracking, not only for the upgrades that we're looking to implement, but also when the upgrades were done, we could actually take that invoice from the heating contractor, for example, and input the actual amount, and to change from the budgeted amount to the actual amount. And we kept real track time as a project management perspective on the cost of the program. So in real time, we had our numbers changing every time that we completed a project. So we basically did the evaluations. From there, we had a roadmap, we had a game plan. The next step was to find the right people. So we were asked to do somewhat of manage the implementation of some of these upgrades. So we vetted, and we had an RFP for many heating contractors. We landed on one that was extremely, thinking progressively in regards to proper installation, proper sizing of equipment, and so on and so forth, because that was one of the things that we really want to focus on. We did see previous Indigenous community programs go too quickly and too early. And what I mean by that is that there was some funding available and some heating systems were installed, and all of a sudden the heating systems weren't working as well as they should have. And that's just because at the time, and it's no fault of anything, at the time, proper installation and proper sizing of heating systems was maybe not top of mind. So it was a little bit kind of loose what systems were installed in certain homes. So this time around, we really want to make sure that we got that right. So with the heating contractor that we had engaged with, they were all over it, which was fantastic. So they basically were able to install the heating, the hot water systems. We had an attic insulation contractor who did most of the attic insulation. We did not do much wall insulation or basement insulation. It was mostly attic. And but again, the proper installation was key, and to verify the installation after the fact. Bulk pricing was also a huge help. We're talking about 150 systems, pretty well, give or take. So that was really kind of a bonus point. Having that game plan, you're able to go to a heating contractor who can go to their suppliers and say, listen, I need 150 heat pumps. And so therefore, let's, what can we come up with? So basically, in the end, just a little summary here of just the mechanical systems. We did wind up installing 54 central heat pumps. So that's with ducting. And these were somewhat cold climate systems as well, before they made a huge splash in the market. Anyway, so there's a lot of options now for technology. Mini splits, homes that had just baseboard heat. Basically, we installed 27 of those systems. Heat pump water heaters, very much newer technology at the time, in fact, in 2020. And so we installed 106 of these. So as you can see, a lot of the homes that we worked with were electric heated and hot water homes. We had 16 homes that were gas heated. We replaced gas furnaces and gas hot water systems for those homes. And on top of this too, when it comes to ventilation, we did install full-time running low-speed, variable speed, or two-speed bath fans. Because we did notice throughout the initial evaluations that indoor air quality was something that was not quite optimal in many of these homes. So basically, it was supplied. The rebate for the ventilation fan was pretty well the cost of it being installed. So it's kind of a no-brainer, and it really did help with the indoor air quality for a lot of homes. So we did install roughly, I think it's 120 bath fans. So outcomes and lessons learned. Most of the upgrades that we did do were heat pumps and heat pump water heaters and attic insulation. I would say probably about half of our homes that we did, in the mid-90s to mid-2000s, that seemed to be the trio of upgrades needed, because they're all quite similar. And these homes actually, as I mentioned, were having really, really good air change rates already. So we didn't have to spend too much time on most of the homes in regards to implementing any kind of air tightness strategies for improvement. After we were done, we did do all the follow-up evaluations as well. And what was really interesting with that is because the energy model itself, we have a way that we could calculate through the model, not so much the actual occupant behavior, but within the model, we can calculate the utility costs of that home using a different calculator. So we were able to take the pre-renovation models and run them through a calculator. So this is your electricity bill. And once we finish with the evaluations and the upgrades and go back and do the test again, we would do the same thing and run that scenario. And with that, what would that electricity bill look like? And we found that a lot of the homes, not all of them, but we were saving up to 45% on their electrical utility bills. I think for the most part, if we added all the homes together, we were a 25% savings overall. And that includes homes that were newer, didn't require much at all. So community-wide, we were saving 25% on their electricity bills. Maintenance, extremely important, just as important as the installs would be. Right-sizing equipment, having the community members know what's in their homes and how to, recognize it and use it and do the basic homeowner maintenance was a key educational component as to what we wanted to relay, not just ourselves as EAs, but also through the heating contractors. So basically, we included first year of maintenance as a program within the funding. That was part of our program. We included those costs. And we also included 2 years of prepaid furnace filters as well, and to have them available to the homeowners because they were quite a large box filter, which they last a longer time, but they're a bit harder to find sometimes. So we had them ordered from the contractor. We had a stash or supply there in storage, and showing the homeowners how to change filters and what the alarms might show up on their new thermostats as to when and how. So we found that to be, again, for community engagement was great, but also just because, let's be honest, not every homeowner knows what's in their mechanical room. So it was just a good time, a good opportunity for us to, just very, very light education on here's your filter, here's the arrow to point this way, change it, this particular one, once every 6 months, or even some are up to a year sometimes. And at that point, they could go from there. And again, healthy homes and not just energy efficient homes. That was kind of our standpoint too, because, yes, we do want to save on utility costs and utility consumption. And of course, greenhouse gas emissions when it comes to our gas heated homes. Our occupants have to be comfortable and they have to be healthy. And, as we have, homes that are already quite well sealed, there's more chance of indoor air quality, becoming an issue if there's improper ventilation and so on and so forth. That's pretty well it for me. Again, if there's any questions at all, just take them anytime.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Maybe if you want to stop your screen share and we'll just put you and Gaëtane both up on the screen, and then we can go through some of the questions in the Q&A box here. So I see some have been answered already by Gaëtane in the Q&A box. So I'll start with some of the unanswered ones, and then if we get a chance, we can also bring up the answered ones for everyone to hear. So I'll maybe start from the first one. This also came up in the registration. We asked folks what they were interested in learning about. And the first question in the Q&A box is asking if you ran into any issues with hazardous materials. Sorry, not you, I guess the communities ran into any issues with hazardous materials during the retrofit process. And the folks also asked about asbestos in the when they registered. So I don't know if that came up for either of you. Maybe I'll pass it to Gaëtane first.
I don't have information on that, unfortunately.
And how about you, Gilles?
Us either. We didn't get to be as invasive as needed to probably trigger that. So, and so I guess that'd be reduced to maybe vermiculite, insulation if we were to go up in the attic space. So we didn't have any of that, in fact, in any of our homes. So yeah, it did not come up.
Great. Yeah, thanks for the input. I'm sure that might be an issue in some communities, so definitely something to think about, but not in this particular case. I also have a question here about consideration for heat waves and forest fires. So just wondering if the communities were thinking about that when doing these retrofits and how that played in. I know heat pumps do have cooling capacity, so maybe that was part of it, but any other thoughts on how increased temperatures and forest fires played into the retrofit decisions? Maybe Gilles, if you want to take that one first.
Sure, absolutely. We did have many homes that did not have cooling, and that was part of our strategy and our community outreach is just to say, listen, like this is getting worse. And then with the retrofits that we're going to be introducing, we are going to be including cooling. So that was a huge part of it. Obviously a very easy sell in many cases. In regards to the fires situation, the resilience to fire is becoming more of a topic lately over the past, well, obviously over the past many years, but at that time, in our 2017, it really wasn't front of mind for us, to be honest.
Yeah, it makes sense. I think every year it seems like there's more fires, so definitely wildfire is an increasing priority and issue. Gaëtane, how about for Akisq?
In Akisq specifically, I know that it was the mineral wool that was being used for the external installations, and as the builder think bright, I'm sure that it's one of the considerations they have, but I don't have the specific details on that. I know that wildfire resilience is going to be part of our retrofit forum upcoming, even in Northwest BC on the coast, because it's more and more of an issue everywhere.
Yeah, for sure. I think the Northwest actually had quite a lot of fires last year, which was surprising for me. So I'm actually quite happy to see it pouring rain in Vancouver today, even though it's almost June. Next question is asking about contractor accountability. So I guess just how do the communities hold the contractors accountable? And then they're also asking about comparing post retrofit outcomes to the energy modeling. I think Gilles, you talked about that with the 45%. But if there's anything else you'd like to add on that topic, maybe I'll pass it to you first, Gilles.
Yeah, absolutely. You know what? I have to say we got really lucky. We interviewed ourselves, like we were charged of the project management. So through Fortis, we really want to focus on really good partnerships. We had an extremely well-versed contractor, which we're still working with to this day. They created such a good rapport and a good relationship with the community directly, without our help. And they're still actually there doing maintenance and repair, not only on the work that we've been, or the upgrades that we did, but also for some of these homes where, we had systems failing. As I mentioned before, I think not only did we install 150 or so, or roughly about 100 heat pumps, probably about 8 of those were 8-year-old heat pumps or 10-year-old heat pumps that were installed in a previous program within the community that were failing. So that just really, really highlighted the importance of that proper install. So they're still still working there quite a bit, and they have an excellent, I've glowing reviews from the community about this contractor as well. So I think that accountability holds very well. They really want to do a good job because they're in there as a large scale program. So I think any accountable or reputable contractor would want to make it a good one.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, it's a lot of continued business for them as well if they have that good reputation, right? So thanks for the input. And how about on your side, Gaëtane?
Yeah, I don't know that there's going to be any one answer for any one community. It's going to be context based, and like Gilles said, the relationship building and the reputable contractor, and having that wording. So if it's BC Building Code in settler communities surrounding the community, it should be BC Building Code minimally. We know that BC Building Code is the best worst house that you can build. It's not aspirational. So we should have minimally BC Building Code in all of our communities. And that can be written down. And then there's a standard that you can hold them to. And if there's a way to have compliance there, wonderful, but at least it's in the contract. And then one of the issues with the Akisq program was there was not funding for the post energy evaluation or post evaluation after. The 2 or 3 houses that were done had great standards, but do we know about the rest of them? No. It would be wonderful to have that data and to be able to show it. That should be just built in. That's just the energy advisors coming back and like tell us about the success. Or you find something that wasn't quite fixed, and now you have an opportunity to make sure that it is done well.
Yeah, that makes sense for sure. Yeah, it's funny. There actually are not any questions in the Q&A about funding, which I thought there for sure would be. So if you guys are interested in a funding question, someone pop one in there and I'll just keep scrolling down. But I know Gaëtane has sent me some great funding resources that we will be sending out after this webinar. So you will get some funding resources no matter what. I have a question here about prioritizing homes. Gaëtane, I know you mentioned that they chose the elders for the first retrofits. The question is about what the selection criteria were, or if there was a scoring system, or just how, I guess, how the prioritization took place. So maybe Gaëtane, I'll just start with you. Like maybe it was just an obvious choice, but how did the community end up deciding on starting with the elders' home?
I'll just share my screen, and I have a spreadsheet here for all the nerds in the audience.
Yeah, you should be able to go for it.
So this was a bunch of data taken from the various reports of the homes. There's no personal identification here in any of them. These are the houses by number. And this was the EnerGuide rating for each of them. So one of them was up to 164 gigajoules per year. And it was determined that if it was a new home, it would have been about 86. And if it was upgraded, it was at 107. So percent difference from new home. So I was the one that color coded this beauty and went and decided all these potential improvements. And then there were the priority upgrades. So if you remember from my picture of my house, there was the different priorities. So in this house, it was air sealing, insulating attics, and then it went down from there. So insulate main walls is down here, priority 4, insulate foundation, priority 5 for these different houses. And so that was assessed like that for all of the different 28 homes. One of the elders' homes happened to be actually quite new, and there weren't that many upgrades that needed to be done. But it's really important that the community decides what their priorities are. And so because that was an elder and they wanted to do all of the elders first, they went with that. I think there were some homes in this case too that were off reserve and others that were on reserve. And I think that the priority was put towards the on reserve houses. So it's going to really depend on each community, but I think the key point is that it's an open process. This is how those decisions were made. We consulted with these people. We talked to these key leaders in the community, and this is how we decided that this was going to go first. If there's not, and we're committed to finding funding for the next batch, for the next round, those sort of conversations, that it's not behind closed doors, and it's part of the comms and engagement, which is really key.
Yeah, for sure. Being really open and transparent, I think that is always important with any kind of engagement. How about on your side with the Osoyoos, Jill? How did that go in terms of prioritizing homes?
Almost carbon copy. I could share my spreadsheet too. It looks somewhat very, very similar. We had a full list. We forwarded that spreadsheet with all, like, we had everything on one. It's too wide. You need a big screen for it, but it showed all like the game plan roadmap for each one. We also grabbed the design heating loads and cooling loads just from Hot 2000. So that we can share that actually with the heating contractor. So they had an idea about sizing systems too. So whatever Hot 2000 can give us, and Hot 2000 is our software that we used to do energy models with, what the air leakage rate is of the home, so on and so forth. So anyways, this spreadsheet was sent to the community. And I think between Chief Louis and Sammy, who was part of the housing authority there, they basically had some of the whole thing that they came up with the priorities at that point. As to which one was going first. And elders were top of the list, and then went from families to singles to rentals and so on and so forth.
Great, thank you. All right, just looking at the questions again. Sorry. So I did have a couple of folks, I'm just gonna skip to the bottom because I did have a couple folks mention funding after I brought it up. So maybe we'll just address that and then I'll go back and try to keep them in order. But yeah, just wondering, I know both of you mentioned ISK. Were there any other funding sources that you used for these retrofits, or other funding sources you recommend communities to look into for their retrofits? I know we do have a resource list, so we don't need to go through all of them, but maybe Gaëtane, I'll pass it to you first.
It's going to be really dependent. I think there's quite a bit available in various pots, and that unfortunately changes. And so really, like that list that you're going to send out that was compiled by NRCan, and is up to date as of February 2024, is going to be really key. And then I imagine Gilles, who works more directly in this realm, is going to have some good ideas too.
Yeah, I agree. It's not just depending where you are that kind of dictates what funding is available, but also when. It's an ever-changing world of rebates. Do know that even with Fortis right now, as well as the Clean BC programs, like they're constantly being revisited, revamped, new amounts, so on, and more inclusions as well. So it's ever changing. So it'll be kind of almost like a snapshot in time as to what's available here and there. For us at the time, just from our past experience, it was ISK that was roughly 66% of our funding, and Fortis BC through the final rebates available through them for everything, heat pumps, windows, insulation, water heaters, so on and so forth, was roughly about 33%. So 1/3 came from Fortis at the very least. So yeah.
Yeah, great, thank you. Just a small question related to funding. I know, Gaëtane, you mentioned that there wasn't funding for the energy audits after the retrofits, but did you obtain funding to do the initial energy audits?
Yes.
Okay. And sorry, where was that from? Someone just asked
Well,
about funding for energy audits.
Well, a lot of that would have, in this case, it would have been from BC Hydro and the ECAP program. And that
Okay,
was
right on.
also where the funding was coming to have the community energy manager position. So in this case, it was BC Hydro and ISK. And then here in this region, there's also Columbia Basin Trust, I imagine, put some funds into this.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you. Okay, so yeah, check your utility, check out if there's regional programs available, and we'll send out some resources as well for funding. There's just a question in the chat. This isn't directly related to these two retrofit projects, but we have a question about heat pumps in the north, and I think we might have a bit of insight we can provide here, given your work in Nisga'a. And Gilles, I know you're up in Prince George, so maybe you have some insight as well. The question is, would you recommend heat pumps in the north? What are the pros and cons? And are there folks up in the area who can service them? Maybe I'll pass it to Gilles first. If you don't know, that's also fine. We can also search up some info after the webinar.
It's all good, thanks. Cold climate heat pumps are making a huge splash. The technology.
Sorry, you're a bit quiet. Maybe just move a little closer to your computer.
Oh. Yeah, my microphone's from my is that better?
A little bit better, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, no, cold climate heat pumps are making a splash on the in the industry. A lot of technology is changing so much that can operate at much lower temperatures. We have to really make sure that we have the backup system in place. We have had, from our lessons learned, during the cold snap last year, -30, even in Osoyoos was almost -30. And the heat pumps, at that stage, none of them can keep up. So really make sure that your backup system is well planned as well. But cold climate heat pumps are definitely able to reach much lower, even in some of the northern areas.
Great, thank you. Gaëtane, I don't know if you have any insights from what Nisga's planning? No?
I have nothing to add. It's a possible, it's a technology that's available and that it's possible and people are doing it. But absolutely the capacity, the quality installs is at this point still an issue that making sure you have trained people involved everywhere.
Yeah, it makes sense. And I think a lot of folks are realizing that now with heat pumps being installed in more places, and hopefully there's more training and more contractors available. I think this one might be mostly for Gilles. It's a question about the heat pump water heaters. So how has the retrofit for heat pump water heaters impacted energy savings compared to the old conventional tanks? And since it's relatively new technology, how are they performing now? So yeah, they're just wondering. Oh, and they're also wondering if any of those water heaters were in a conditioned space as opposed to in a garage or something like that.
Absolutely. You know what? That's a very, very good question. It's still a newer technology. They are a little bit noisier than your standard electric tank. There's actually a bit of a whirring sound because it is actually a heat pump that sits on top of a tank. It does make a room cold. So there's some kits out there where you can actually kind of duct the cold air to go outside as needed. So they take a bit more room for that reason. So they're a bit bigger. They do take a bit of room. Overall, good feedback from what we've installed so far. Just a few people that don't like the look of them or that they take up more room in their mechanical room. They should not be installed in an unconditioned space like a garage. So that'd be one thing. But the bonus is that it does use 45% less electricity than a standard electric tank. So you do save on that. And we were actually able to prove that with some other new home initiatives as well that we've been involved with.
Great, thank you. Did you mention the operating threshold for cold climate heat pumps? That's another follow-up question in the chat. I don't know if you did.
You mean as to how low they can get?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you know what? There's some out there down to minus 25 very, very easily. And then from there on, we usually have a backup system built in. So these backup systems for cold climate heat pumps, help to make the heat pump work as well as it can for as long as it can. And so up to minus 25, then it might be a full electric or full backup, for example.
Yeah, it makes sense. And then obviously you get those weird, like last winter when it gets super cold, so you'll need to have something for those anomalous situations as well. I think we're getting close to the end, so there are some questions we haven't answered, but we will do our best to get back to folks on those by email. I have a question about quality control. I don't know if you have insight on that or if that would mostly be done more on the contractor project management side, but they're asking about quality control procedures and documentation. Gaëtane, I don't know if you have any insight on how Akisq handled that.
Akisq wrote a really good RFP and got contractors who care and demonstrated that they cared, and that their whole model is high performance and excellence. So in that case, Akisq was lucky to be able to find that. And maybe I don't know how airtight their contracts were, but in that case, it maybe wasn't necessary because the contractors were self-motivated to do an excellent job. And then we know that doesn't happen everywhere, unfortunately.
Yeah, makes sense. How about on your side, Gilles?
Exactly the same thing. Exactly. That relationship, finding a contractor, and getting 3 quotes or having an RFP with just 3 people. Like you might want to keep looking. Like there's some really good contractors out there that are proud of what they do, with the help of also things like the Fortis Ally Trade Ally Network and through the Home Performance Stakeholder Council. They're really the not the professionalism, but the these people who really want to step up and work. They've got the resources for that, and we're seeing a bit more of that, which is great. But it's super important.
Great, thank you. So we're getting close to our wrap-up time of 12:15. So I just wanted to give both of you the opportunity to just say any final words or wrap-up comments that you have. Gaëtane, I'll pass it over to you first.
No, I'm just very grateful to be here. Thanks for having me, and I learned a lot from your presentation, Gilles, so glad I got to participate.
Thank you. Yeah, we're so glad to have you, especially with all you've been like extremely busy with your own work with the Retrofit Forum. So it's amazing that you made time to come out. Gilles, please go ahead with your final comments as well.
No, again, pleasure to be here. Pleasure to share. There's work, so much work we have to do yet. Absolutely. You know, everything from just low-hanging fruit in your homes to full out deep energy retrofits. It's just you know, let's have our homes as comfortable as possible and as efficient as possible. I've also had I just saw in the chat there a request to put up the link for the LEAP workshops. There's one in Prince George next Tuesday. There's one in Kamloops on Thursday and Burnaby on Friday. It's about heat pump renovations. And so anyways, maybe what I'll do is I'll send a link to you, Aaron. Do you want to share that? I can't quite find it in time here for us to before we end.
Yeah, no worries. I'll send an email probably tomorrow morning with the recording and with all of the resources. So yeah, again, we're sorry that we couldn't quite get to all the questions in the Q&A box, and we'll try to follow up with everyone after the webinar to make sure that your questions get answered. Thank you again to both of our speakers. We really appreciate you taking the time to come and share your knowledge with us today. And we also want to say a huge thank you to Osoyoos Indian Band and Akisq First Nation for allowing their success stories to be shared. I think it's so important that everybody can learn from these and apply them to their own communities. And then thanks to everyone who came out to the webinar. We appreciate your time as well. Thank you for your questions and your interaction in the chat. I will mention we have an event coming up in June. It's a little bit more informal. It's a learning lab on community engagement. So we will send out some information on that in our follow-up email as well. So that'll still be a virtual event, but folks will be able to unmute and chat with each other and share strategies and successes around community engagement for energy efficiency projects and home energy efficiency. And then finally, I just wanted to let you know when you close the webinar, you'll see a survey pop up in your browser. If you have time, we'd love if you could fill that out and just let us know any feedback you have so that we can make our future webinars even better. So yeah, with that, have a great afternoon, everyone, and enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you very much. Bye.
Thanks.